Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the show, the Ever4 Mindset Podcast. I'm your host and its founder, Michael Rebelo. We are here live at Freedom Fest 2026, right here at the Main Street Media Network booth. I'm a 20-year-old entrepreneur who chose entrepreneurship over the traditional college path, inspired and driven by my goal to help and inspire other middle Americans just like my mother to learn about financial freedom, time freedom, and also to think bigger and think more clearly and more freely. And we are seeing a lot of economic changes right now that is coming to the United States. And sometimes I wonder, well, is it just United States? Is it just North America? Or is there a lot of global economics that is happening right now that we're not aware of? I can't speak much on it, but I know someone else who can. Barbara Kolm. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
You have a ton of titles, and for me to rattle them off, I would probably forget one or two. So, Barbara, please, you came all the way from Austria to come out here to Freedom Fest 2026. So, tell us who you are, and why are you here at Freedom Fest?
Well, first of all, because freedom matters. That's why I've been here the last 19 years. I only missed one, which I could do online. This was due to COVID, when we were totally locked in Austria and were not allowed to leave the country. So I missed one. But freedom matters, as I mentioned, and I'm also a member of the Freedom Party in Austria, which is by now the largest opposition party. We are almost close at 40%, which is big for us. Yes, and I'm the economic spokesperson of the party in Parliament. So I'm a lawmaker, in other words. And prior to that, I was also vice president of the Austrian Central Bank. And of course, running the Hayek Institute and the Austrian Economic Center, which is both dear to my heart. And with the Austrian Economic Center, we have developed the format, which is called Free Market Roadshow, where we tour 38 countries in Europe and did over 12 stops in the US, defending markets, defending freedom. This year was, of course, focused on the 25th anniversary, not only of Adam Smith, but on the birth of your beautiful nation.
Right.
And also of Hayek's 66th anniversary of the Constitution of Liberty.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara does not sleep. That is what I'm getting.
Well, that is true.
Yeah, I was going to say, you do so much. And, I'm glad that you do, because I know that each action that we take today or at any point, it's like a domino effect. It eventually starts to compound. Yeah. But I'd love to rewind a little bit. How did you even get to this point of life? What sparked you to do all of this? What's the genealogy of that? So dive into that a little bit.
Well, Mike, thank you for asking. But this is very interesting. I was luckily born into a family that embraced freedom. And for them, freedom and individual responsibility, self-responsibility was a key. And we were brought up in a way that competition matters, and that individual freedom and entrepreneurial freedom is truly important. And once you have this in your DNA, then you're better off, obviously.
Right.
So you don't have to study it via books. But on the other hand, of course, when I studied in the US, to be honest, I first learned about the Austrian School of Economics in the US, not at any Austrian university, because this is what we don't teach. We still teach Keynes and other stuff. Of course, Hayek was discussed when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in economics at home over dinner, but that was it. But the Austrian School of Economics, I only made the acquaintance in the US with it. And ever since, I'm in.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's kind of like one of those moments where you have to seize the opportunity.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I have to do this. That's like our just previous guest, Nancy, who's actually running for Nevada District 12. And she was like, I have to seize the opportunity. And I'm like, So it's almost like either you get it or you lose it. It's like you have to take it. So I'm really glad you brought that up. But Barbara, I kind of want to dive into for a second a little bit. You have a lot of people here that are economists. You have a lot of people that are here that are free thinkers. You have a lot of people here that are investors as well, also locally and abroad. But I kind of want to dive into what you're seeing in Europe right now, or at least in Austria, with their economy. And how does that differ from the United States economy? Because here's a mistake that I think that we're making as Americans and also as investors. We're too focused on our own economy. But we're actually all intertwined in this one massive economy where, for example, if the American economy is affected, the rest of the world's economy is affected. If Europe's economy is affected, the rest of the world's economy is affected. There's massive chunks here that aren't being addressed. So I'd love to dive into that. How does European economics, or at least Austrian economics, differ than ours? So dive into that a little bit.
Well, thank you. Of course, we are now in a global economy. It's a world that is interconnected, and it's also less, I would say, centrally planned, which is good. On the one hand, apart from Europe. So decentralization matters a lot. This is a new thing that is coming in, and we've just only recently seen that through modern technology, with AI, with cryptocurrencies and all those things. They matter a lot.
Right.
This is what many politicians still don't have on their radar. And they are all working, especially in the old continent in Europe, in the old way. So what we from Europe have seen when we look across the pond, across to the US, tax competition, tax cuts, debureaucratization, deregulation, those are the big, beautiful things that we should embrace in Europe as well. Unfortunately, we don't, because we do the one-size-fits-all thing out of centrally planned Brussels. And here Hayek comes in again. Hayek actually had warned our societies in the 1944 that central planning doesn't work. We know that. We've seen it. Communism failed, luckily, after a while, but it simply doesn't work. What we have embraced in Brussels is exactly central planning. And this is the result of the stage of the European economy that you see right now. So many, huge numbers of unemployment, no innovation,
right?
High debt rates, high GDP high debt levels in correlation to GDP per capita. So all those things are really super bad. And one could do it differently, as you could see from the other side of the pond.
Right.
But it's not only Northern America, it's also Southern America. If you've seen who has won the recent elections and the drive that we see in this in the right movement, that's really hilarious and very promising. And when it comes to economic theory and action, we can truly combine what Millet did. This is the best Austrian economics at its best, if you put it this way. But many other countries are implementing this. And there are sparks here and there also in the United States. There are many Republicans who embrace this and who want to go for more freedom, for more tax cuts, etc. And this is good. In Europe, not so much. But there is hopes. There are elections coming up, but we can talk about that a little bit later, maybe.
Interesting. And here's another topic that I want to discuss that's been discussed for actually a long time now. In fact, this Saturday I'm having Adrian Day on the show. He's with Adrian Day Asset Management, does gold and silver and investment asset management. Mm-hmm. And him and similar people like Peter Schiff, Brian London, part of the New Orleans Investment Conference, they talk about the failing American dollar. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to dive into that and see how our American dollar, which has been losing its value for since whenever Nixon took us off the gold standard, 1972. I think it was in August. And now it's been devalued by 99%. And how is that affecting, what's the inflation like in Europe, or at least in Austria? And how has our dollar affected the economies around it?
Of course, your inflation has affected us also, but our inflation within the Eurozone is also a tragedy. We have seen wrong monetary policy. I would say start with 2000, when interest rates went down, and then with 2008, after 2008, the grand financial crisis, when we hit the zero bound, and ever then became negative. So these were consequences of this fiat money project.
Yep.
And as long as we have fiat money and no sound money, we will see inflation, because there will always be politicians or central bankers who expand the monetary base on the one hand, and who will do or play their cards and tricks in order to make sovereign debt possible and make them survive by issuing government bonds, etc. And so what we have now, and this is interesting with regards to dollar and euro, we are going into the central bank digital currency issue with the euro, whereas your president decided to focus rather on stable coins. And this was a total opportunity, I would say, for the US that he grabbed. And if you look at the amount of stable coins and what is traded in stable coins, that he crowded out the BRICS idea with a gold currency.
That's right.
And so he kind of pushed that really back a lot. But it didn't help us in Europe at all. So Europe is totally unstable, and since you asked for inflation rates, ours in Austria was the highest or among Western Europe. Right now we still have 3.6, 3.8%, whereas even Germany or France are much lower and are in their 2% ranges. But ours is homemade because of bad politics.
Right.
And if you just provide subsidies and not produce productivity and have a big government share of government in the economy, you don't end up well.
Interesting. And it's these policies and these institutions that we have to keep an eye out for, because I think especially Americans here, they vote with emotion. They don't vote with logistics. Yeah. And I believe years and years and years ago, they voted with logistics. How is the economy going to be supported? How is the economy going to be affected? And nowadays, we're just voting with emotion. We're not thinking with our noggin, as I like to say. Mm-hmm. And I believe from what you have said, the same thing is happening in Europe and also in Austria, to say, well, our economy's failing, and if we still want to, keep going, we need to have policies or people in place that can help support our economy and also stay ahead of the game, which I guess segues into my next question. How can people, whether, let's say from a macro perspective, whether it's the United States or Europe, where there's a huge economic change that's coming through, what could people do, whether they're the regular W-2 worker, or maybe they're an entrepreneur, how can they stay ahead of a economic curve that could be coming? Like what would you say would be the best way to go about? Maybe it's investing in real estate, gold and silver, maybe some ideas like that, but what should they be doing, or at least watch, to stay ahead of these curves?
Well, first of all, be flexible. That is the first thing. Be mobile. The second thing, be educated. Third thing, well, actually, this should be the first. Be educated, be flexible, be mobile. Those things are kind of the preconditions. And then, of course, make sure you find the right legislation that does not strip you off your income, which means tax competition matters, and we need to look at those your jurisdictions that do that best. So if you're an investor or an entrepreneur, go there, that's for sure. Third thing, legal framework. We have to have sound, and as you mentioned, institutions, sound and solid institutions, which means they don't change law ex post. So after this framework will work, I can invest, I'm safe, I'm solid. And then when it comes to assets, this is everybody's individual's choice. Some people are super happy with gold and with precious metals.
Right.
Some people rather go into real estate, and there I would say go to places where the legal framework is sound and solid, and where you can predict that even in 20 years' time, because after all, you can't take this away with you under your arm.
That's true.
Is the same. And then, of course, understand your environment. Because I think this is truly important. Investing in countries where you don't feel who is pulling the strings I would
Yes.
rather not do that. So going to Africa, going to some Asian countries where you do not know, or Middle Eastern countries, that's kind of tricky.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I kind of want to rewind the tape a little bit. Education, self-educate. How can someone, like for example, if they're wanting to get into economics, or at least to protect whatever wealth or investments they have, or at least their portfolio, to get ahead of whatever economic curve, whether it's in America or on a macro scale in Europe, how can they self-educate and stay ahead of that? Maybe it's reading a chart, maybe it's just reading books. What would you advise?
Well, first thing, there is so much good stuff out there in all the entire freedom movement across the world, and especially in the US. And now in Europe, we are finally catching up with that. So our own stuff is at the Austrian Economic Center.com or at the Hayek Institute, but you can also follow the Free Market Roadshow, which is our big tour that we do across Europe. We've done that for 20 years. We started 20 years ago in 4 capitals in Europe.
Wow.
And now we do this huge thing. But so there you can read, learn, follow us on Instagram, follow those handles. And then there is plenty of good podcasts like yours where people can be educated and can learn. So it's not only the books that give you the big background.
Right.
But of course you can also dive in and learn from them. And eventually I have to be honest, when I prepare for a lecture at my university where I teach, I eventually come up and reread a Hayek chapter or Mises or you name, or Deirdre McCloskey, for example, when it
Right.
comes to societal questions.
You know, there's so much good resources out there. And the fact that nobody's able to tap into it, maybe not able, but they don't acknowledge it, is really sad. Like, for example, there's YouTube, there's social media, there's articles, there's websites like yours, there's movements like yours as well. Like, people can follow and say, oh, now I know a little bit more than what I did, I don't know, maybe 2 days ago. So thank you so much for sharing that.
But I have to give you just one last thing that I think is truly important.
Yes.
Since you do the Rising Capitalist project.
Mm-hmm.
So, capitalism is nothing else but the protection of property rights. And if we do not protect our property rights, then we are wiped out. So this is why freedom
so
matters,
true.
and that why property rights matters. And without that, no society will be functional.
Thank you so much for bringing that up too. And actually, yes, we do have the Raising Capitalist project. If you are interested, see the link below in the video. But thank you so much for bringing that up because yes, there's so much that we have to protect and acknowledge to make sure we still have those founding principles and also those things we can lean on. But Barbara, thank you so much for sharing that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to follow Barbara and also her works and what she's doing across the globe, follow her on her websites down below and also her social media as well. Check the video description for more. Build yourself better and bigger every day. Live better, live bigger. Always move ever forward. And remember to self-educate and always be aware of what institutions and what policies are being factored into your government. And Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight as well. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Has been my pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.